All right. So I am really excited for this conversation, Kurt. I think the conversation that we have had in the past was really, really fruitful. And I think, you and I both agree that the conversation that we're having is really important for us to have, but it's also really important for parents and teens and those working in that arena also have access to some of the things that we're talking about. So I'm really excited that you and I are here to have a little conversation about leadership and social skills and how those come out in all the areas that we're seeing with teens.
I agree, Lorraine. I think it's really important, especially now with the screens and all the distractions that teens have. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah. So when we were talking, I was sharing with you that I predominantly am working with students at the teenage years, starting in eighth grade, really through the grade 13 where they transition out of high school and they're out either maybe they're doing college, maybe they're doing armed forces, or maybe they're working in a job. And
Sure.
so in this conversation, you and I talked about the real value of leadership skills. And I would love for you to maybe just share a little bit of, your top 10 leadership skills that maybe you're not seeing with students, or you're building and trying to make more aware.
Sure. No, that's a great idea. I think in the top 10, I think the first one that's so important is smile and say hi. As you know, with the work you're doing, it's so critical to create these relationships, and for leadership, it's so important. And to make friends, and if you're working in a job, like you said, you're helping kids to grade 13 where they're going to work. Well, when they get on that sales floor, if they're working at maybe it's a Dairy Queen or maybe it's a dental office, when a customer comes in, to smile, greet that person immediately and say hello, smile and say hi. Or if it's a coworker, smile and say hello. Or if they have a job interview, if that employer is coming up to them, to stand up, make good eye contact, smile, say hello, have a firm handshake. So that's really the top one, because I see a lot of these teens where they just maybe haven't learned that yet, and they're distracted they're on their screens, of course. So that would be the first one. What do you think about that? I didn't know what.
Well, yeah, no, I think, as you were talking about that, I was thinking about how often our teens will really be nervous about trying something that is quote unquote outside of their comfort zone, right? So when we're in our comfort zone, we feel really safe. And I think often our devices give us that false sense of security and safety. And I notice even myself when I will go out to a coffee shop or something and I'm waiting for my friend, or I'm standing in line, I'll quickly open my phone to give myself that feeling of, I'm not alone here. And I think that that aspect of feeling safe and feeling like you're part of something is really a misnomer. And we're missing those opportunities, like you said, to smile and say hello.
I do the same thing. It's funny that you mentioned that at coffee shops, where you pull something out because you don't want, sometimes you want somebody else there, or you just feel like you need to be connected in some way. So I think these tips are really important, making good eye contact. And I know for the autism community, some teens, that's a little tough, but they can always, one tip I'll give is, if eye contact is uncomfortable for some young adults, look at somebody's nose or look at their cheeks.
Mm.
That way you don't have that intimidation of looking right at their eyes. But if you are comfortable doing that, making good eye contact really conveys confidence and that you're interested in that other person. So that would be number two. And you hit it right off the bat with number three: turn off the electronics. There's a time for the electronics and there's a time not to have the electronics out. And the time to not have the electronics out is when you're with a customer, or when you're in a conversation like you and I are having, or when you're at work. especially at work. Leave that phone off, preferably at home or off in your car or turned off in your pocket. So that would be the third one. And then the fourth, and I think we forget these little manners, and I think you'd agree with this, saying please and thank you. So
Mm-hmm.
important. If they're at work and a customer is buying something, instead of saying, I need your credit card, could I please have your credit card, miss? And when a customer is buying something, to say thank you so much. And when they say, when they say thank you to you, that teen wants to answer, make good eye contact, smile, and say you're welcome. We don't want to say no problem or yep. And I'm sure you've heard that from adults
Yeah.
and teens.
Well, and as you're talking about this, it really makes me think about, that modeling, right? We, as adults, we're like, we should be modeling these things, but
Exactly.
how valuable is it that a teen will say please and thank you to an adult, and an adult maybe will like reflect and say, oh my goodness, I don't think I said, please, in this initial interaction. And that's where, we often believe that leaders have to be a manager, or a leader has to be somebody with a title, maybe a student council president, but there's no greater value than demonstrating and modeling. And right there, you are taking leadership steps. And I think often our teens and adults, we don't see ourselves as a leader because we don't have that quote unquote title, but just that modeling of please and thank you, making good eye contact. And as a teen, it's way more powerful when you do it in response to an adult than it is for an adult to do it in response to a teen. And I think there's a lot of value in recognizing that leadership will arise in a lot of different places without that title, without that, perfectionism, and just starting to recognize that there's leadership opportunities in all of the actions that we're doing, um, to grow those skills, to make teens feel more confident. Like you said, I think, you're exuding confident.
Yeah.
And once you exude it, then you can start to feel it. And then it actually becomes like a real thing.
That's beautifully said. I love that what you said about you don't have to have that title, because I forget about that also. Yes, they don't. They can demonstrate leadership in whatever position they have. And I
Yeah.
think you're absolutely right. You get confidence from doing it and getting that positive affirmation from somebody, and then watching that, maybe that customer come back or that friendship deepen, which I think is so important, especially nowadays where we're so disconnected. And then the next one, number five, would be shake hands firmly.
Mm.
I think you saw in my book, not too tight, not too loose, just right. I think that's how it goes. I don't remember how
Yeah.
it's on there,
Yeah.
but making a great first impression. And I think that's something that I'm not sure, since the pandemic, where we're doing fist bumps and everything like that. I kind of was hoping that handshakes would go away because of all the germs, but it's back again. So we should make sure teens know how to really firmly shake somebody's hand, look them in the eye and say, it's so nice to meet you, Mrs. Martin, just to do that properly. And then the next one, because of the handshakes, introducing yourself and making a friend. Maybe it's at work, or maybe it's at school, knowing how to go up to somebody and saying, hi, Lorraine, I'm Tammy. It's so nice to meet you, and shaking their hand and having good eye contact and a friendly tone and a friendly smile.
Yeah, I guess that's something that, brings up an issue that I find happening a lot in schools, is that ability to step out of where we're feeling really comfortable, at lunchtime or in the hallway. And you said making a friend. It doesn't have to necessarily be your lifelong friend, but, making new connections with other students, and not just always sitting in the same space, making sure, like, that feeling when you walk into a lunchroom and your
Oh,
seat is missing, right? If you have that feeling, then you've become so accustomed to that safety net that it's maybe time to think about finding another place to sit and challenging yourself. And man, as a teenager, that can be so scary. So I think those tips that you are given, look around, make eye contact with somebody, give them a smile, like that opens a door where perhaps we didn't see a door before. And I think when we stay in that zone of comfort, we don't look for doors that might open us up. And I just, one of the challenges that I give to the teens that I work with is try and sit with somebody new because it is scary. But, I often will say the first time you do something is really, really hard and really, really scary. But once you've done it, it's never going to be that hard or scary again because you've already taken that first step. And yes, it requires you to have that courage, but the rewards are really, really great. Once you know that you have that confidence and that courage, then you can go ahead and try again.
That's wonderful. And what I love about what you're saying about sitting with somebody new is just think in the schools, if all those kids who feel so isolated, if other teens would just look around. And I think there was a program somewhere I read about where the new kids, the teens knew how to go up to somebody and bring them into, to the community kind of. And just think if any child that was sitting alone, if the teen knew how to just felt comfortable and went up to them and introduced themselves and just made them feel comfortable so they didn't feel all alone and isolated in school. Just think what a different world we would have. So I love the work you're doing with teens. The other thing that I have in the top 10 is pay attention, and that means good listening skills.
Mm.
A lot of people, especially in sales, nobody ever seems to listen. So it's kind of important for teens when they're entering the work world to learn to listen to that customer, to learn to listen to their friends, to their parents, to their teachers. And good listening skills really show a respect for the other person. So that's really important to have good listening skills. And then on top of that, one of the top 10 is being enthusiastic. I think that's important. Some people that you talk with, if you go to buy a product at a store or maybe a different business, you're really buying and donating to people that you like and trust. And if somebody's
Mm.
enthusiastic about something, then you kind of feel like, okay, I'm making the right choice. Where I'm sure we all have dealt with somebody where they just don't, it's monotone. They don't have that personality that really draws you in. And then you're not so sure about the product. And unfortunately, you might make a poor judgment, say, gosh, I'm not sure if I want to be that person's, if I want to really hang out with this person or not. So I think those two items are also important. What do you think about those?
Well, as you were talking about listening, I recently realized that if I have anything happening in here when someone else is talking, then I'm not listening.
Sure.
And so many of us are in our heads all the time. And, I often will, think about that opportunity when I was in therapy with my husband and they would say, you reflect back what you hear them say. Or if you're thinking about what you're going to say next, then you're not listening to what they're saying. And I think there's a lot of value in practicing listening. I don't know that many of us remember or really know what true listening is anymore because there are so many things happening in our world and distracting us that it's really hard to, I often think about meditation, right? That challenge of turning your brain off. And if we can't do that, then we're probably not listening very well and practicing that. So a really good strategy is in a conversation with somebody to reflect what you heard them say and maybe give them an opportunity to allow that an opportunity to verify and confirm that what you heard was actually what they said. And you're right about enthusiasm. I think often we're very lackadaisical, and our teens are are very much like, I don't want to seem really enthusiastic about this because what if somebody else isn't? And if they're not and I seem over enthusiastic, then what will they think of me? And I think often that that hurdle of wondering what somebody else thinks about me prevents us from trying to be enthusiastic. But I also think about that challenge of getting kids engaged and interested. And if we chose a little more enthusiasm, maybe it would be, and I'm sure you will agree, that enthusiasm is contagious rather than an affront, like I think first of all, a lot of times kids will like pretend like they're not excited or enthusiastic about something else, but like it really is contagious. And if you hold on to that enthusiasm, you probably can pull at least one other person in with you.
I love that. I totally agree about the enthusiasm. What you said about it being contagious,
Mhm.
that's so true because somebody gets excited about something and then you're interested. And you're right about teens being like acting like they're not really interested, but they are. I mean, it's kind of funny. I think we all do that. And yeah, I agree with you about the listening because I do that sometimes too. I'll have something in my head and I'm trying to listen to the person, but I'm not listening as well as I should be because I'm thinking about, okay, what do I say next? Which is something I need to stop doing. And I think we all probably do that. And like you said, with all the distractions out there, it's never been a world like this where we have all these different things coming at us every minute of every day. You've got 24-hour news, you have social media, you have your cell phone ringing, you got your computer, your desktop, email, text messages, chat, everything's coming at us. So it's a whole different world than it was. And I think meditation, I wanted to mention something about this. I think meditation is great for teens. I'm glad you mentioned that. Teens have such anxiety now.
Mhm.
I think that's a really good idea. And then the last two that I've got in the top 10, ask questions, which, questions, when teens ask questions, it shows that other person that you're listening and that you're interested. And if they're going to a job, it's really important with customers or donors if they're working for a nonprofit. And it shows that customer that not only are you interested, but you can clarify what they're saying. Because, let's say somebody walks in and your teen is working at, let's say, an outdoor power equipment store, and a man comes in and he says, oh, I want to buy a new lawnmower. Well, you could spend an hour with that person. And then if you didn't ask who the lawnmower is for, he might say, oh, it's for my 12-year-old daughter who's starting a lawn. Well, you don't want to sell that. You're thinking this guy's 300 pounds. I'll sell him this bigger lawnmower he can handle. Well, no, you need to ask, who is this lawnmower for? So you find
Mm.
out it's for the 12-year-old daughter who's 110 pounds. Well, you want to give her a lighter lawnmower. So that's just one example. But I think that listening, it's so critical. And then, of course, practice proper body language. If you're at a trade show or even a farm market, if a teen is volunteering there or working there, having you're not having your arms crossed, not looking down, but looking approachable. And same thing with friendships. If you're going to meet somebody, it's not really welcoming to be looking down with a scowl and having your arms crossed. Much more welcoming to have your shoulders up and your head high and smiling. So those would be the top 10, the most important skills that I think teens can learn.
Yeah, and I think, I was thinking about how just being observant as a teen can help you realize how important these top 10 are. Thinking of that body language, watching other people and seeing how they hold themselves and just observing to yourself like which of these people would I want to approach? Am I willing to approach the person who is holding their phone and sort of looking down? Or am I looking to engage with that person who is smiling and making eye contact and holding themselves a little bit more open? I think of that as one of the key strategies, right? So if I'm closing my arms, I'm closing myself off to you. If I'm opening myself, I want you to come talk to me. And and it's scary going back to that comfort zone. It's scary to put yourself out there and stand in that open body position because then you are vulnerable, you know. You've taken your shield off. This is a shield. And as soon as you take your shield off, you become a little bit vulnerable. But those are the people we want to approach. When we see somebody who is being vulnerable, we know that we can be vulnerable with them. And that is where we really want to be. And those are the kind of things that I talk to kids about is, taking that risk is vulnerable. And when you do that, you realize that you have courage, other people have courage, and there's that connection. Um, so I would love for us to, shift to, we've talked a little bit about ways to use these skills, but what about, let's talk about other opportunities, right? We've talked a little bit about jobs, we've talked a little bit about volunteering and schools and sports and hobbies, but let's expand a little bit and give kids, you don't have to do all of these things all at once at your first day on the job. But you talk about a little bit in your book like that interview, or I can talk a little bit about approaching your teacher or approaching your friends or your peers in schools, right? Like we can practice these skills in safer environments so that when we go into that more vulnerable experience, we have a little bit of practice.
That I love it, and I love that you're helping your teens, the teens that you're helping, learn to approach people that maybe, like you said, have their shield up, because you just never know what people are going through. And when you mentioned, I like that you mentioned that you don't have to do everything at once because that's so intimidating. And I feel like a lot of this, like you said, can be practiced. Maybe they can role play with their brother or sister a couple of
Mhm.
these items, or with their parents if they're comfortable doing that. I don't know how some teens are with their parents. I was never really when you get to be 10, you don't want to see your parents again until you're about 25. But
Right.
one thing that I think is really helpful, and you triggered this for me when you said observe people, I think going to a farm market, or if there's
Mhm.
a local trade show, where vendors are, and just walking around with your teen and having them tell you, who's exhibiting great body language, who's doing a great job with social skills, because you'll see a variety of people. You'll see some people standing up, enthusiastic with the customer. You'll see other people sitting in their booth. There'll be customers at the table, but they'll just be looking at their phone, ignoring that customer. So I think that's a great learning experience. And also, maybe if they're comfortable, making that phone call to order carry
Mhm.
out, practicing when you go to a restaurant, having that, you talk about modeling, having the parents model how to greet that waiter or waitress and politely make an order. And then the next time the team can do that, well, have you put the order in for us now when the waiter comes in? That's just good practice. And like you said, then they get the confidence. And then the next time they do it, it's more comfortable. And then when they become an adult, it's just no big deal. They can call, make an order, they can order at a restaurant or do any of the things we're talking about.
Yeah, and I really loved how you said to do it with a sibling because I think, it offers you the opportunity if you're the oldest to model for your younger sibling. If you're younger, you can model for your older, give them some practice for when they're going out and doing whatever they need to do. And then just bringing it back into that classroom environment, that school environment. It is scary to do it in there, but you have friends, you have, peers, and you can say, if you're not willing to go sit with somebody new all by yourself, ask a friend, say, hey, we've sat at this table for a really long time. What if we tried and went to a different school or a different table and sat with them? What do you think would happen? And just, maybe even problem solving before you do it. So I think there's a lot of ways and a lot of opportunities, and I really like the idea of going to, maybe a mall or a craft fair. There's lots of opportunities where other people are out there selling, right? And looking and seeing what they're doing and seeing how they're holding themselves, seeing how they're interacting. You don't even have to interact with them. You can do a lot of observing and maybe make some notes and or have a conversation with somebody like a sibling or a friend about what you noticed.
That's a great idea. Almost like being a mystery shopper where you don't have to interact. You can just
Right.
walk in and see how you were made to feel. Some places you'll feel great. You'll feel really welcomed. Other places you might be surprised because nobody says anything to you. And then you're
Yeah.
thinking, would I actually ever come back here or would I spend any money? Probably not. So it really, like you said, observing, I think that's a great way to learn those skills. So important for these teens who some maybe have never been exposed to these types of
Mm,
things. Maybe their parents are busy working and maybe the school hasn't had the types of CTE, career and technical education, or DECA, things like that to help them.
right. Right. And I mean, again, you don't have to be in one of those kind of programs or
No.
classes to learn these skills. And I've been hearing a lot of people talk about, getting a job as a teenager really helps you as you are entering out into that 13th grade, right? Maybe you're going to college. It still gives you that confidence in making connections with people. I have realized that when kids leave high school, they haven't practiced making friends
Mhm.
for probably 15 years, because a lot of times kids follow the same school pattern with their friends. And so, going to college, you have to learn a brand new skill about meeting new people who are going to be your friends. And if you haven't practiced that, if you haven't taken that first job to try out how do I know if somebody's like somebody I like or not, then it's really hard.
That really is. I hadn't given that much thought. And I think what you mentioned about getting a part-time job does really help give kids those skills. They can practice, they get the confidence, they can introduce themselves to other coworkers, make new friends. So it's not just the same circle of friends. And then when they go to college, they can use those same skills. There are so many benefits, I think, to working a part-time job, getting the
Yes.
confidence, the social skills, just learning responsibility, accountability, hard work, getting comfortable helping customers. And then when you go to college and then when you go apply for, full-time jobs, I think you're much more comfortable. It looks good on the resume. So I'm a huge proponent of whatever it is, if they start their own business mowing lawns or if they work
Yeah.
part-time somewhere, it's so important. And if you're working part-time during school, it helps you with your social skills to meet new students. And like you said, maybe you grab a couple people and say, let's go sit somewhere else. Let's talk to that person that sits alone every day at lunchtime, and let's introduce ourselves. And they might be surprised to find out that person becomes their best friend. You just never know
Yeah.
in life.
You
I've learned
never know.
that.
Yeah. So Kurt, you've been talking a lot about your book. Tell us where we can find their book, where we can find you, and ways that people that and who you might want to work with, things like that.
Oh, sure. I help a lot of teenagers. I have books. Well, I'll hold up my one book since my banner, you can't really see it, but this is my crash course in social and career skills for teenagers. Oh yeah, you got it. That's right. And I do have classroom packs, a teaching guide, a parent's guide. You can find my books on Amazon. I also do consulting with teens. And then you can also find me on my website, smilethebook.com, smilethebook.com. And you're doing great work with leadership and peers, not fears. And where can people find you, and tell our audience a little bit more about what you're doing, Lorraine?
Yeah, so when I was in high school as a teacher, I was realizing that students were not getting these opportunities. And like we talked a little bit, there was only the certain kids who had a title. And so I stepped away from the classroom to start Peers Not Fears. And that you can find all of the stuff that I'm doing on my website, peers dash not dash fears, because if you run it all together, it kind of makes snot in the middle, and that wasn't what I was going for. But yeah, I offer. I try and working with schools, but I'm also working with individual teens and giving them some of these like little challenges where they're part of a group and we give each other, you know, that reinforcement, that confidence that like it's okay that you didn't do that this week. We're going to try again next week or things like that. But yeah, it's all about trying to build confidence, self-confidence, resiliency, and courage in teens because I feel like it's not happening as much as I want it to be happening for our teens in schools. So I'm really excited that we were able to have this conversation, and and you can find our websites and links to our stuff in the show notes. And we're really excited. If you got a chance to watch this, please share this with somebody that you think might be able to learn a little bit, and share a comment below if you thought it was good and what was your takeaway. That would be awesome to know.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Yeah. All right.